Hello,
Bonjour.
Annie.
It's the 150th anniversary of Canada.
So we're going to talk about some Canadian history.
For at least 15,000 years, the First Nations have lived here on Turtle Island. Since the 15th century, settlers from Europe and elsewhere established settlements and governments here. Today, we're going to give a brief history of the settler nation of Canada, founded 150 years ago. Canada became an independent country on July 1st, 1867, after the Constitution Act was signed by the premiers of Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Over the next few years, the Northwest Territories were formed. Manitoba was established in 1870 after the Red River Rebellion. British Columbia joined the next year, and Prince Edward Island joined in 1873. In 1898, during the Klondike Gold Rush in the Northwest Territories, Parliament created the Yukon Territory, and Alberta and Saskatchewan became provinces in 1905. It wasn't until 1949 that Newfoundlanders voted, by a narrow margin, to join Canada as a province. And then, in 1999, Nunavut became Canada's third territory. In 1982, the Canadian Constitution was patriated from the UK to Canada, signaling Canada's achievement of full sovereignty, with the British Parliament giving up the right to amend Canada's Constitution. However, Quebec was the only province that did not sign the Constitution, and since then, there have been 2 referenda on the question of Quebec sovereignty. Some other interesting facts. Because Britain still maintained control of Canada's foreign affairs under the Confederation Act, its declaration of war in 1914 automatically brought Canada into World War I, in which over 55,000 Canadians died. But in the Second World War, Canada's state of war with Germany was declared by King George VI, 7 days after the United Kingdom, on September 10, 1939. The delay showed Canada's greater independence. In all, over 1 million Canadians served in the armed forces during World War II, and approximately 42,000 were killed and another 55,000 were wounded. Canadian troops played important roles in many key battles of the war, including the Allied invasion of Italy, the Normandy landings, the Battle of Normandy, and the Battle of Chelles in 1944, as well as D-Day. Canada provided asylum for the Dutch monarchy while the Netherlands were occupied, and Ottawa still receives a gift of tulips every year to commemorate that service. The Great Depression in Canada during the early 1930s caused great hardship across the country. In response, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, CCF, in Saskatchewan, led by Tommy Douglas, introduced many elements of a welfare state in the 1940s and 1950s. And then Douglas and the newly formed New Democratic Party helped to establish many of those policies at the federal level. Canada was one of the original signatories of the North Atlantic Treaty, NATO, and Lester B. Pearson, who went on to become Prime Minister, is said to have laid the foundations for modern UN peacekeeping. Notable Prime Ministers. The first Prime Minister was Sir John A. Macdonald. The first French-Canadian Prime Minister was Sir Wilfrid Laurier. The longest-serving Prime Minister was William Lyon Mackenzie King. The Prime Minister who oversaw the patriation of the Constitution in 1982 was Pierre Trudeau. The first female Prime Minister was Kim Campbell. The current Prime Minister is Justin Trudeau, son of Pierre Trudeau. And finally, the history of Canada's flag. At Confederation, the flag was the Union Jack. In 1871, it became the Red Ensign. In 1957, the flag was changed to the Canadian Red Ensign. And then, in 1965, the flag was changed to the current Maple Leaf flag.
That's just some Canadian history. For more information, look at the links in the description below.
Thanks for watching. Happy Canada Day, everybody.